Jon Moxley retires Bryan Danielson in brutal fashion.
And at WrestleDream, MJF and Adam Cole make their returns.
It's time to roar around the ring. All right, WrestleDream, Jon Moxley, Bryan Danielson, and we talked about it before with Danielson winning the world title. Kind of turned into a Ric Flair thing from a long time ago in terms of the
days
retirement.
gone by. Yep.
You know, the retirement run, and if he loses, he's done kind of thing. And, well, he won it at All In. That was the end of August, mid-October, and Jon Moxley retires Bryan Danielson, taking the world title from him. But not only that, of course, the beatdown after the match, the bag came back from what we saw it All Out, but this time Wheeler Yuta doing the honors, turning on Bryan Danielson. They had the rest of the roster come out to kind of chase him down, made it a really big emotional ending to that show. Haven't seen Danielson back. How do you feel about going this route when it comes to potentially retiring Danielson, at least from full-time work, how brutal it got, Wheeler Yuta's turn, but let's just talk about specifically the timing of Danielson being retired right now.
I feel there had to be a reason why he took the title off Swerve, right?
Yeah.
Just so here we are. Is it really a retirement, like full on? Because I don't think we're going to get the Ric Flair kind of thing, like legitimately, but I don't know. I feel like there's still a lot to come from this story, or at the very least, I think that he might end up playing a part. I don't think we see him for a while.
Sure.
But he'll play a part in costing Moxley the title at some point.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of casually throw in there, retired from full-time wrestling.
Right.
So does this mean he's Adam Copeland now? And is he going to be in and out? Or is he just doing one-offs or whatever it means, right?
He's going to be Nigel's commentary partner now.
I mean, Nigel seemed to have a bit of a heart with all this situation too. It's weird because, and this is more on AEW than it is on Danielson. If Danielson's happy, of course, more power to him.
Right.
But, and this whole run has been about that. It's just confusing because you have Danielson come out giving this whole speech about, I want to be with my family and so on. But then if I win the world title, I'm sticking around.
Yeah. And
then I'm retired from full-time wrestling, but I still might be around. And then you kind of leave a cliffhanger here with Moxley because, of course, you don't want to actually retire Danielson like this, right? Like have him go out like this. You expect at some point Danielson to come back. So it's a weird mix of, is this a final run or is this just an angle? Are you actually retiring? Brie was at London, right? You know, and it's an odd mix of it all. But in terms of Moxley and how his crew looks, this just adds to that dangerous factor.
I think that plays a part, though. Like, I think both sides of that play the part. So this could very well just be an angle. Not like disputing the fact that like Bryan Danielson might actually want to retire from wrestling, at least on a full-time basis, legitimately in real life. You know, like maybe see him once in a great while if the story makes sense. But also to serve a point to creating this angle to build this dramatic angle with hopefully a good payoff,
right?
To strengthen the presence of Moxley's group, whatever that's going to turn into being.
So how do you feel about the timing of it, the location and just the decision to do it now? He won the world title at the end of August. So he mentions if he loses the title, he's done. And then a month and a half later, he's losing the title. So in terms of what they're telling us, he's done. Was this too quick or was this the right time?
It seems quick, but again, it's going to depend on what the story ends up being here.
Sure.
So it's kind of like prematurely calling it like, oh, this sucks or this was great. In the moment, it's like I don't hate it, but I also do kind of question, like it just seemed that there was kind of like this, ever since he won the title, there's this weird kind of uncertainty hanging over everything.
Yes. That
just seemed like, oh, well, he got it and now he can't defend it, but he's having this match and, you know, and then just, so again, it whatever comes with this whole group with Mox and his whole crew is going to determine whether or not this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it goes back to they're using something that has been done legitimately, right? We're about to see it in 2025 with John Cena.
Right.
A final run, right, where they announce, like, hey, I'm done after this. Ric Flair, if I lose, I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm hanging it up. And like you said it perfectly, there's this whole time, it's been a bunch of uncertainty of, like, what does this mean? Are you retiring? He says, I'm done. This is my last full year. Gives an emotional speech. And then they say last full year of full-time wrestling. Then he gives another emotional speech. He wins the title. If I lose the title, I'm done. Now they do it like this. So us wrestling fans are like, well, we know how wrestling works. He's not just going to go away after this. So it's just that whole uncertainty of like, has this entire thing just been an angle? Or is Danielson himself, and especially knowing Danielson's history, is he himself actually wanting to retire?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sure. So I don't want to say I'm sure because I want to speak for the man, but I think he may have gotten to a point where it's like, right, look, and he said so as much when he came on the show that he has done pretty much everything he wanted to do.
Sure.
And it's no longer for survival. It's no longer for money because all those things are in place for him. It's more just out of joy for himself and what he likes to do. So I do think that there probably is a lot of legitimacy to the fact that he might want to just call it a career and go out and say, hey, I wrestled the people I want to wrestle. I've had the matches I want to have. Maybe there might be one more match or a couple more people I'd like to get in the ring with. But other than that,
right.
you know, but again, it could be serving as an angle to whatever they're going to do with this group.
Yeah. And I think if this turns out to be a whole angle, like involving Danielson, this whole thing was an angle. I'm good with where they did it, how they did it, Moxley doing it being as brutal as it was. It was in Washington. Of course, he's a Washington guy, so that makes sense as well. If this isn't an angle and he actually is following his word of like, I'm done full time and this was retiring, that's where I'm questioning doing it this way. He should have won the world title a lot sooner. Either that or he should have lost it all in.
Yeah. Because
this should not be, whether again, storyline or not, this should not be the way the Bryan Danielson character looks full time going out. So this is all an angle to push the Moxley story, and Danielson's going to end up back, potentially get that title back in 2025, and then go on another potential run or something. I'm good with this. But if he is actually done full time, and this is the way they wrote him off, as quickly as it was too, he only held that title for barely over a month.
Yeah.
You should have you had his family there. You could have had him lose the Swerve, get up, standing ovation at Wembley Stadium of all places, a beautiful send-off, and then have him go part-time. You could have done it there, right?
Yeah.
Or give him the title sooner. Again,
this story, and here's where you kind of question AEW's patience, because we have a lot of gripes the way they push a story, abandon a story, or don't let a story make sense. I sway to the side of believing this is part of an angle.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of reasons of what you just said, it doesn't make any sense to do it that way. AEW sometimes as a whole doesn't do things that make a lot of sense, and they stick with it, and that's the end of the story. I'm hoping that this plays out to a part where Danielson comes back, and it's just like maybe he'll come back to help Darby win the title from Mox. Maybe something like that might play out. But as long as there's a play out where it's like there's a reason why this all happened, there's a big payoff coming at the end, whether we get a thing where it's another match with him and Mox, I don't know how they would set that up. But just, I'm with you in the sense of you can't say, well, he lost, that's it, let's move on.
Right.
He's gone, he's retired. Like, we're going to have his send-off thing and that's it. No, man, the way everything ended left so much of a cliffhanger that you can't just call it and say, all right, moving on to the next thing now.
Speaking of cliffhanger, how'd you feel about Wheeler Yuta turning on Danielson after the match, being the one to put the bag over his head like Moxley did it all out? Was this the right call for Wheeler? To be determined.
In the moment, it was a great, like, to get that angle going, the whole after the match segment. I think it worked really well. It was effective just because of the expression of Yuta, the way he was coming across as far as, like, it was done deliberately with intent, but it was also confliction of, like, I'm doing this because I am choosing my side, but I'm not necessarily, like, happy about it. This is where I'm at.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I think it does. And everything we say about the question mark around Danielson and doing it here too quick or not, I love what this means for Moxley. I love what this means for Moxley's faction. And I love Wheeler's decision. First off, the whole thing of Wheeler being confused, let's keep in mind he's trios champions with Pac and Claudio.
Right.
So we need that to make sense.
Yeah.
So long term, at least for right now, it makes sense for him to be on their side.
Yeah.
And in terms of Moxley, like the promos that he's cutting and he's trying to change AEW and you're either with us or against us kind of thing, I don't know that this is Wheeler just being the bad guy and like, you know, I don't care, or more of like, I'm afraid. And I love this because, again, it adds to Mox's character. I'm afraid of Mox.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do this because I don't want to end up like
It's just survival at that point. Yeah.
And so and that just adds to the danger of this faction. And, looking at this faction and how they've looked post WrestleDream, just beating everybody up. The one thing I'm questioning is the level of names that are involved in this Mox story, right? Against them. Because he is the world champion. He's trying to take over the company. You got Marina Shafir, by the way, carrying something in a briefcase, that the title we're assuming, right? And there's the whole question mark of who is controlling Mox, right? Yeah. And of course, everyone goes to Shane McMahon, which there's history with Mox, there's history with Danielson, all that makes sense. But like the names that are going against Mox's faction, I'm like, I'm sorry, they deserve more. Like he is the world champion, and you are sending Top Flight.
No, this has to be because it's very reminiscent of like the NWO takeover of WCW back in the day, and in that. Your biggest star back then was Sting, who Danielson's kind of in that role right now of the guy that like who suffers from them and then takes off and is supposed to be gone for a long time. But in that you had guys like, you had big names going after him, like your Lex Luger's, people like that back in WCW, and it's just like to have that kind of thing going now with this faction, and then you're just be like, oh, we're gonna kind of give you our Rampage dudes.
Yes. That's what it's been so
far.
Like
no, like you're supposed to have your Ospreys and your Hooks, people like that. Swerve going. These are the guys that you're supposed to be opposing this group, because it does come down to Mox's faction versus AEW.
Yes,
and that's pretty much the lines drawn down the middle now. Here's what we're seeing,
right? Which
is why I bring up the NWO WCW, because that's pretty much what you saw.
Right. Especially with Moxley holding the world title now. Yeah. Like now it's not just a faction that's threatening to take over. He's got the main title.
Yeah.
And the biggest name, no disrespect to this name, friend of the show, Daniel Garcia is the biggest name on the opposite side.
Yes.
Of who is fighting this faction.
Who, by the way, is also involved with some other things going on.
Correct.
Like, yeah, so
it's like that is the biggest name who is also, focused on other things. Where are your swerves? This is the same thing we were saying when the Elite first came back with the Young Bucks and Okada, and they're threatening to be the bosses, which they've kind of just casually pushed that aside as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if you're trying to make this power-hungry group against the company, and now they have the biggest title, your biggest names need to be involved in this.
Yeah.
And when you're throwing out Private Party, who people haven't cared about since AEW began, and you're trying to push them again.
Yeah. That's true.
You know what I mean? And then and you're trying to put, and I appreciate trying to give them, you're feeding them to make them look strong, right? Because they're just beating down Action Andretti and Orange Cassidy, and that's fine. But we need the bigger. That was Bryan Danielson that they took out.
Yeah.
Like, let's remember who this was, and let's if this is the story that is going to put Danielson away for at least a little bit, let's make it worth it. Did we put Danielson away to push Private Party?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we have so many other names that you could be threatening to Mox's group. So many names that Mox has a history with that you could be putting together. And that's where it's just like, okay, the follow-through needs to be there. You had 4 shows in 1 week after WrestleDream, and there was barely any progression with this faction.
Right.
I love Mox's faction. I love the promo. Problem is, we've heard the same promo 3 separate times on 3 separate shows. Move along with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Whatever you're going to be, whatever this group is eventually supposed to become, let's get to that. Whoever's pulling the strings here, let's get to that. Let's move on towards that, developing the story to that direction, because otherwise, like you said, we're just going to keep getting the same promo over and over, where it's like, eventually this is going to happen. Eventually we're going to take over. It's like, well, you got the championship now.
Right.
So what's phase 2? Because you already did phase 1 of your plan.
Yes.
So what's next?
And phase 2 was not beating up Action Andretti.
No, I mean, look, if you're the dominant faction in the company, I don't mind, just as a show of strength, if you are attacking undercard performers. If you're one of your guys has a one-on-one match with I don't know, Orange Cassidy, and then as a crew you come out and jump Orange Cassidy and they whatever. I get it. That's the point of a heel faction.
Sure.
But if it's just like, we're gonna keep, next week we're going against a Private Party, we're going against Action. It's like, come on, man, like. Let's go for the big fish in this.
Right.
Because that's who's supposed to be opposing you in the end. So let's start working towards that.
And it's just, it gets a little unrealistic for Mox's faction, because when you talk about what Mox is saying within his promo and talking about wanting to take over, and then in the same breath, he's ignoring the biggest names in AEW.
Yeah.
And he's calling out these smaller names. That takes away a little bit what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't you, like, if you're doing a takeover and then it's like you have the Bucks over here saying we're the EVPs and we make all the rules, or it's just, why don't you go start there? Or just go after, like, why is this, why should Swerve be worried about what's going on with MVP, blah, blah, when it's like, if you're going to be in the title hunt, you got to come after me.
Yes.
You're a former champion. You're a threat to me. We're going to just go attack you.
Mox is literally saying, I'm your boss now. You're working for me.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, perfect example. You mentioned WCW and like the names that were against NWO. Another example, Nexus debuted.
Yeah.
And who did Nexus target? John Cena. The main event of Raw.
They went straight for the head of the snake.
And they went for, and then they just took over Raw. Look at that team at SummerSlam. John Cena, Edge, Jericho, the biggest names.
I mean, even in the Attitude Era, when you had Vince McMahon and the corporation.
Yep.
Right? You had the whole corporate crew, and it was just like, there was the guys on the roster who were like, it wasn't just Stone Cold.
Yep.
It was Mick Foley and Big Show and these guys who were like, they band together to go against the corporation. And it's because that's what you do when you have this like unfair collection of superstars or wrestlers who are like, hey, we're the big dominant force now. We're going to run roughshod over the whole roster.
Yep.
The roster is supposed to retaliate.
The Shield's another one. The Shield came in, main event of Survivor Series.
Yep.
Right? Got involved in every WWE title match to the point that people thought they were working for Punk and they weren't. And it's like, yes, if you're claiming you're taking over, going and blowing up Rampage is not taking over.
It's not taking over.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's bigger names, and then it makes the bigger names look dumb because outside of the Bucks, who are purposely ignoring it and kind of getting shit for it, which is fine, it's like you said, Swerve's focused on something else. Adam Page is focused on something else. Yeah. All these big Jay White, all these big names.
All
are
these former champions, by the way.
Former champions who claim they want to be champion again, and then they're not paying any mind to who is the current world champion and the destruction that they're doing.
It's always been a gripe of mine when it's like, you have all this going on, but every person who gives an interview or does a backstage statement will never mention the target of everyone's ire. Like, they won't mention the champion. They won't mention, we're going to go after this person. At least for all the problems that Eric Bischoff and WCW had, people understood universally in that company when the talent would give promos or they would talk antagonistically about the NWO.
Yes.
They would talk about how much they hated that Hollywood Hulk Hogan had the world title.
Yep.
That he desecrated the title by spray painting NWO on it. And it was always a thing of like, this faction is, they're lording over this company and we got to get rid of them.
Right.
Now it's just like the faction's talking about how dangerous they are, but everybody else is ignoring them.
Yep.
They got to work that out.
So real quick before we move on, how often, if you're booking it based off what happened at WrestleDream, how often are we seeing Bryan Danielson? How soon before we see him again? And is he actually part-time? Like, how do you play that out?
I would go with part-time. I wouldn't have him show up right away. Again, what's the story?
Yeah.
And to the point we've been saying here for the past 5, 6, 7 minutes, whatever it's been, who else is involved here?
Yes.
Of high caliber name, because you look at Ospreay has his own thing going on, right? MJF has his own thing going on. And we'll get to all that stuff, but it's like you said, the biggest name we have that can even kind of go over to that side is Garcia.
Right.
And it's like he's still figuring out his place in the main event scene. So.
Yeah, no, and I think with Danielson, I think he's got to go part-time just because, he made this as emotional as it was. It would look dumb if he lost and then didn't go part-time. But I don't think we see him for the rest of the year.
I mean, you have Darby Allin you can throw, but
you have names at some point you hope they throw. Christian Cage still has a contract for a world title, by the way.
Yeah.
And then, Jay
or just
White
a coming together of people who can say, look, I don't like you, you don't like me, but we both hate this group.
Yeah, and you have enough names to throw at them to keep Danielson away long enough to do that. All right, before we get out of here, let's run the gauntlet of the rest of AEW from WrestleDream and afterwards. And speaking of WrestleDream, Adam Cole returning, MJF also returning.
Yeah,
and they kind of reignite that feud. Adam Cole seems to be the babyface this time around. MJF playing more of the heel. How do you feel about how they've reignited this?
Well, first off, I feel like they set things right. Now, this presentation makes sense, but then I'm like, so are we allowed to now just forget the whole Devil and Undisputed Kingdom thing? Because that quickly went nowhere.
Sure.
And nobody made mention of this now. And I'm just like, the crowd, they're doing the Adam Cole baby and everything. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we're going to gloss over that.
Sure.
Whatever. Fine. I'm with it. I'm interested to see where it goes from here because there's a lot still left unsettled between MJF and Adam Cole. I just, it's just like we're going to kind of rehash a lot, but with role reversal.
Yeah, and that's where it gets confusing. This is a great storyline. We want to see it. I want to see it. It's most confusing, and I'll give AEW a little bit of leeway here because the Adam Cole injury played a role in this.
Yes.
Not their fault. I get it. But this is where it gets confusing because if you're not going to involve Undisputed Kingdom, that's fine. But Adam Cole, as heelish as he was last time we saw him, MJF, when he returned, he was the babyface in the summer, and Adam Cole was the heel running away. And now we're just supposed to forget all that, like you said. This is where, as great as the story is, AEW sometimes go cartoonish. You know how in cartoons the craziest shit will happen, and then the next episode is it never happened.
Nobody ever died.
Right?
Nobody ever
no
got
one
hurt.
ever died. No one ever blew up, and then everyone's back together. This is what it feels like, where it's the craziest shit happened at the end of last year. Yes, Adam Cole got hurt, and now it's that never happened.
Never. We didn't have this whole faction where he was the devil leading it, and it's no, just never happened.
Right, so
it was a fever dream.
Adam Cole is just he mentioned, Roddy, I got to do this myself, but he's the babyface, best friends with a group like Undisputed Kingdom,
if we hear
who's doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
We're just forgetting about everything that happened. You have to reference it even a little bit.
I think you do it even. I agree. You have, even if you just lightly reference it, you give a nod to it.
Yes.
Fine, but don't act like you didn't invest damn near a year into building up that story.
This should at least be heel versus heel in this feud.
Which is tricky, but yeah.
It's tricky, but it's been done because
Yeah.
Adam Cole has done some shitty things to get here, and of course we know what MJF is, and we know they both are kind of on that route right now. Let's not act like Adam Cole's this clean babyface in this whole feud because they decided to make MJF heel again. I get it. The injury is no one's fault, but we have a memory. It was less than a year ago.
You take two heels and you have them out heel each other, and you just let the audience choose which asshole they like better.
There you go.
That's the way to run it.
Before WrestleDream, Daniel Garcia, we mentioned him. He announced on AEW TV that he is sticking around in AEW. Is this the right move for him?
As of now, yeah. I think so. I know a lot of people can say, no, you just go to NXT, go work with Triple H. Yeah, we can get there. The guy still has ways to go, I think, as far as developing his character, as far as developing everything he can do in ring. A lot of talent there. I think just get that experience. I know it's AEW for all its flaws, but it's a great platform to have.
Yeah, no, I think it is the right move. It's never a bad move to go into NXT because he is, not 100% ready to be the top guy yet,
Right.
and NXT could get him there. But AEW looks at him as the top guy, and that's tough to ignore right now. Of course, he had that moment with MJF at All Out and, kind of standing on top. He's leading the faction against, Mox and the Bucks right now. He's involved with Jack Perry in the TNT title. So there's a lot good for him right now to stick around. I don't blame him for sticking around. Either one would have been the right call. AEW is the one that looked dumb in this whole thing because you gave him a big moment at a pay-per-view and then had to go figure out a contract situation afterwards.
Exactly.
By
it
the
made
way,
more sense for them to make sure he stays because then you really look stupid. Yeah.
Kris Statlander facing off of Mercedes Mone, a little more of a babyface role here. Yeah. Do you like this quick turn?
I do. I think that you need to have somebody who is in the women's division, especially in both companies. You need to have someone who is a definitive lead top babyface of that division.
Yeah.
We saw that in WWE with when you had Becky Lynch as a face. People you need that so that it makes your heel champions even better. Like a Mercedes Mone needs someone to she needs that other person not only to kind of carry the in-ring promos.
Sure.
But you need an adversary for someone like her. And she's a great adversary as a heel.
Yeah, for sure.
But you need that baby face. Statlander, I think, does really well in that role.
And that match with Willow got her a lot of love at All Out because of how great that was. Kris Statlander is very lovable. We've seen that in the past, so that makes a lot of sense. She isn't going the lovable route. She's still got that badass persona, but
you can have that and still be a babyface.
Right. And that's a good way to go. And it just feels like that women's division, everyone goes heel.
Yeah.
And it's we need some clean baby
need
faces.
A standout baby
strong
face.
baby faces, right?
Yes.
Toni Storm was a forced baby face by the crowd, but remember, she was heel, right? Everyone else just goes heel automatically in that division. Britt Baker, too.
Yeah.
We need a strong baby face. Kris Statlander could easily be that. Kyle Fletcher turning on Will Ospreay, giving Konosuke Takeshita the international title. How do we feel about that turn? And Don Callis' current group, which is now Takeshita, Fletcher, Lance Archer, and Brian Cage.
I like it. I think that the whole, we're best friends thing kind of deal, and it's just like all that serves to the turn, the issue with the tag title situation, and then Callis. I've been saying, and I know a lot of people, you've been in agreement too, is that Ospreay has obviously outgrown this spot within this group. He's a solo megastar in the company. There's no reason to keep him around the Hill faction. He's a babyface.
Yeah.
So it made sense to me. I like the way it was executed. I love the whole thing with Callis coming in, trying to get him with the screwdriver. Like, it worked out really well.
It worked out. It works out a lot for guys like Kyle Fletcher, who, of course, his partner's hurt. So, like, we need to do something with him. Takeshita finally getting some love. You love to see that as well. And you mentioned it. Ospreay, full-on babyface, no connection to this Don Callis family. So there's not that weird wrinkle into one of their biggest faces on the company. By the way, he's friends with Don Callis.
He's in who everybody hates universally in that.
Yeah, it's like, what is this? So, erasing that makes a lot of sense. I love it for Kyle Fletcher to kind of give him, a bit of a spotlight with a guy that he's close with in Will Ospreay. So I think it makes a lot of sense on both ends. Makes both sides look a lot stronger than they did about a month ago.
And yet again, another one of those Ospreay had an amazing match.
Yep.
Candidate match of the year things. He just turns them out, man.
Swerve Strickland turned down MVP and Shelton Benjamin. What do you see as the next big point in this story?
I said he would.
Yeah, you did. You did.
I don't know if I don't know if we're getting to Bobby Lashley. I don't know who else is coming in, if anyone else is coming in. If it's just this, because you need someone to kind of be the physical representation for MVP and Shelton Benjamin.
Sure.
I mean, if you want to have a Shelton Benjamin Swerve match, fine. But I don't know how much heat you get behind that. I would assume there's a Bobby Lashley coming in.
Yeah.
But I did like this. I did like him. His reasoning is basically just saying, Prince Nana's family, despite everything.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I loved the reasoning. It made sense. Nothing against Shelton Benjamin. He's dealt with this his whole career. It just kind of is what it is. He's not the face of a faction like that.
No, his promo skills, his mic skills have never been.
No.
All his greatest stuff is in the ring.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's great. And he's a great support to that faction. And I'm going to stick to what I said even before all this. If we don't have Bobby Lashley coming in, we need a Swerve turn at some point. Right?
It would make more sense.
We need someone to headline this faction. And no one else on the current roster outside of Swerve can make sense to headline this faction. A Hobbs coming back could make sense.
Yeah.
But again, he's more support than the lead guy.
It's the muscle.
He's the muscle.
It's the muscle.
So you could have Lashley, Hobbs, and Benjamin, or Swerve, Hobbs, and Benjamin. But if it's either Swerve or Lashley. And I would be shocked if at some point Lashley, being a free agent, seeing Benjamin and MVP using the name the Hurt Syndicate, right, as close as it is.
As close as you're going to get.
As close as you're going to get, if he doesn't show up.
At this point, I feel like they're telegraphing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think we get Lashley, but if no Lashley, I'm good with Swerve headlining.
And Lashley is an easy fit outside of that storyline to slide into your main event spot.
Chris Jericho casually mentioned that, by the way, he could see himself working for WWE in the future again. What would you like to see out of one final Jericho run?
Surprise Royal Rumble entrance, maybe a WrestleMania match, but I think we get a Royal Rumble entrance. Obviously, I'm not talking about this coming one.
No.
But I think we get that, and then it would just lead into WrestleMania weekend, his induction to the Hall of Fame, which I think is actually pretty deserved.
Yeah, I would love to see this for him because I do not think this AEW run should be how he goes out talking about Danielson. This has been very cringe, and a lot of it is his fault, but that's because they just look at him and say, do whatever you want. And some people are just good talent on screen, and they don't have the ideas behind the scenes.
Right.
He needs someone to kind of like, hey, we know what you're strong at, and we're going to utilize that. WWE can do that. Of course, his history there makes a lot of sense. And I think it would be good. I would say a legitimate run to a WrestleMania match. As much as we don't love it, he has stayed full time, right? Like, so it's not like he would have to, knock off Russ getting back in the ring. Like, he has been in the ring. He could pull off one more run, one more feud before a Hall of Fame. So I would say a little more than a Royal Rumble appearance. WrestleMania feud into a Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame for sure.
I'm all for that. Jay White beat Adam Page at WrestleDream. How soon do you want him in the world title scene?
As soon as we can get him there.
Yeah.
I think it's been far too delayed. And now that he's back, pick up right where you left off.
Yeah, and this is the crew right here that should be going against Mox.
Absolutely.
Bullet Club
100%.
Gold. Like, this is one of the best factions that's not used. Like,
that's your next up big faction that has been prior to whatever Mox and them are, and it should be just the obvious fit.
The Guns, and Juice Robinson go after the Trios title. Yeah. Jay White goes after the world title. Like, it's a perfect match in terms of story.
Yeah.
And you have easily built this faction and then just don't use it. Like, they did a great job putting this faction together, and they just don't use it.
Plus, if you want to talk about fanfare, I mean, the fans are behind Jay White, so
100%.
it's easy babyface run.
Mariah May defeated Will Nightingale, one last thing, and then Anna Jay pins Mariah May, gets a title shot. It was an eliminator match.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Mariah May's title run after a slow start to it?
It's going to be slow. It's going to be, I mean, it's picking up steam, and she's doing really well with it. It's just, it's hard to match Toni Storm's whole run. So I give her that kind of leeway with it. But I mean, she's got talent. She's good in ring. I mean, you know, I think she's doing fine.
Yeah, and I think with Mariah May, it's what we mentioned earlier. There's not a lot of strong baby faces in the women's division to push a heel. Toni Storm was a heel and then had to go babyface because the girl she was feuding with was also a heel.
Yeah.
We thought Mariah May was going to go babyface, and she ended up going heel. Because
Which, by the way, is still one of the greatest heel turns I've seen.
Oh, 100%. It was great.
Yeah.
But it's just we need more strong baby faces. It's not Mariah May's fault. She is great on the mic. She is a great champion. We just need better baby faces to support this heel title run. Roar Around the Ring is available every week. Find us on YouTube at Roar Around the Ring. He's at Dude Darrell Dale Taylor. I'm Justin Valentine. Talk to you guys very soon.